He was once the man that all of Hollywood revolved around. He once made a princess break every rule just to meet him. But in the end, there were no lights, no more parties, and no more marriages that once filled newspapers with headlines. There was only a room and a few children standing beside him. That was Stewart Granger, a man who climbed to the top and then gradually lost everything he once had. So what happened between that peak and that ending? The answer begins when a boy was born with a completely different dream. He was born on a day in May 1913 in the upscale Kensington district of London, with the birth name James LeBlanc Stewart. His father was Major James Stewart, a strict army officer who had been awarded the OBE. His great-grandfather was Luigi LeBlanc, a famous opera singer of the 19th century. In James's family, there was both a tradition of military discipline and a tradition of art. But as a teenager, James was especially interested in science and medicine. He studied at Epsom College, a prestigious school that had once been a medical institution. James truly wanted to become a doctor. He dreamed of holding a stethoscope, treating illnesses, and helping others. It was a sincere and compassionate dream. However, reality did not allow it. His father could not afford the expensive years of medical training. James's dream of becoming a doctor had to come to an end. After that, through a chance opportunity, he enrolled at the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art. There, James quickly realized he had a natural advantage: a tall appearance, a deep and powerful voice, and a strong confidence that drew the audience's attention. Just as his acting career began, James encountered another problem. He discovered that his real name was causing major confusion. In Hollywood, there was already another famous actor named James Stewart, who was very successful. To avoid confusion and build his own career, James decided to change his stage name. He took his grandmother's surname, of Scottish origin, and became Stewart Granger. This new name sounded stronger and more memorable. It quickly became known on prestigious stages in London, such as Old Vic and Drury Lane. His career began to develop well. However, just as hope was rising, World War II broke out and changed everything. Without hesitation, Stewart Granger enlisted. He was assigned to the Gordon Highlanders Regiment, then transferred to the Black Watch, one of the most famous infantry units of the British Army. In uniform, he was no longer an actor. He became a real officer, ready to fight for his country. But an unexpected event occurred. A stomach ulcer forced him to leave the military in 1942. Having to leave his comrades while they were still fighting was a great sadness. Stewart Granger returned to civilian life with a sense of disorientation and a strong desire to do something meaningful to make up for the interrupted time. It was during the harshest years of the war, when the British people had to huddle in dark shelters to avoid Nazi bombs, that they found a small sense of comfort in movie theaters. And that was also when the fever, named Stewart Granger, officially exploded. When he returned to acting, Granger brought all the determination and discipline from the military into every role. The major turning point came in 1943 with the film The Man in Grey by Gainsborough Pictures. In the role of Peter Rokeby, a romantic hero, but also full of sorrow, Granger created a powerful wave across Britain. At that time, the British people desperately needed a place to temporarily forget the horrors of war. Historical films with beautiful costumes, exciting sword fights, and Granger's love stories were exactly what they wanted. The Times called him Britain's #1 pin-up boy. At that moment, only Bing Crosby from America could match him in popularity. Young girls during the war competed to cut out his pictures and stick them on their walls. Whenever the name Stewart Granger appeared on a poster, cinemas were always packed. Success followed success. He continuously shined in films such as Fanny by Gaslight, love story, and especially Madonna of the Seven Moons. He was not only handsome. Granger proved his versatile acting ability, from charming aristocrats to characters with complex inner lives. Even when acting alongside major stars like James Mason and Vivien Leigh in the most expensive film of the time, Caesar and Cleopatra, Granger still stood out in his own way. American audiences began to notice this English actor. His appeal was so great that by the end of 1945, he was voted the second most popular film star in Britain, just behind James Mason. His income reached £30,000 a year, a very large sum in the late 1940s. Despite his fame and wealth, Stewart Granger remained clear-minded. He often argued with producers about script quality because he did not want to keep playing the handsome leading man. He wanted roles with more depth. The combination of the strong appearance of a former soldier and refined stage acting skills helped Stewart Granger become a symbol of Britain during the post-war Reconstruction years. He paved the way for British actors to conquer Hollywood. He proved that refined masculinity combined with real talent would always have a firm place in the hearts of the public. But just as the spotlight on screen was at its brightest, the first cracks began to appear in his private life. In 1950, the major studio MGM recognized the star potential of Stewart Granger and invited him to sign a long-term contract. They wanted him to replace the image of Errol Flynn, which was gradually fading. The first film that brought great success was King Solomon's Mines. Granger had to travel to Africa for filming. He faced intense heat, dangerous terrain, and wild animals in Kenya and Uganda. Instead of being intimidated, Granger was very excited by these harsh conditions. He proved to everyone that he was not just a handsome actor on screen, but also a strong and resilient man. The film was a major success, helping Granger become an international star and earn a 7-year contract with MGM. However, behind the scenes of the film was more dramatic than the African weather. Granger admitted that he had a brief affair that lasted 6 months with his co-star Deborah Kerr during the filming. The peak of Granger's career in Hollywood was closely tied to the sword in the legendary film Scaramouche in 1952. To prepare for this role, he trained in fencing very diligently with an Olympic champion, to the point of wearing out more than a dozen pairs of training shoes. The result was the 6-minute and 30-second sword fight at the end of the film, a continuous shot with no cuts and no stunt double. Film historians consider this to be the most beautiful and longest sword fight in Hollywood history. Audiences at the time were thrilled to see him leap across theater seats, wielding the sword with strength and precision. Life magazine put him on the cover with the title, The Greatest Swordsman. After that, he continued to dominate the adventure film genre with roles in The Prisoner of Zenda and Beau Brummel. He became the model of a charming hero that no one of that generation could match. However, when his on-screen career was at its highest peak, his private life began to show cracks. Many people thought that Stewart Granger and the beautiful actress Jean Simmons were the golden couple of Hollywood. But the reality was very different. The two first met when Jean was only 16 years old. They officially fell in love on the set of Adam and Evelyn in 1949. Although Granger was 16 years older than Jean, and at that time already had a wife and children, he still pursued her intensely. The British press at that time wrote extensively about this. They married at the end of 1950 in Arizona, in a ceremony arranged by billionaire Howard Hughes. In the early years, they lived in a beautiful house overlooking the San Fernando Valley. They often hosted Sunday parties with famous guests, such as Elizabeth Taylor and Spencer Tracy. However, Granger's possessiveness soon became a burden. He was hot-tempered, jealous, and always wanted to control his wife's career, often interfering in Jean's choice of roles or arguing with directors on her behalf. That very intensity led to a classic incident in Granger's career, when he learned that Howard Hughes, the powerful and eccentric billionaire, was deliberately making things difficult and had inappropriate intentions toward Gene Simmons, Stewart Granger flew into a rage. He did not hesitate to sue Hughes and demanded $250,000 in damages. He even spent $150,000, an enormous fortune at the time, to buy out his wife's contract, helping Gene escape Hughes's control. That action was both protection and a clear expression of Granger's absolute possessiveness toward his beautiful wife. Ironically, as Gene Simmons's career flourished with Oscar nominations and major roles in Spartacus and Elmer Gantry, Granger began to feel that he was falling behind. He became jealous of his wife's success. The heated arguments became more frequent, and the abuse of alcohol also began to appear regularly in the home that had once been filled with laughter. By 1960, the marriage between Stewart Granger and Gene Simmons officially ended in a bitter divorce. Later, Granger admitted that this was the greatest regret of his life. But no one thought that a Hollywood actor could make a real princess of the British royal family fall for him. After divorcing Joan Simmons, Stewart Granger returned to London in 1960. There, he became involved in a relationship that many considered unimaginable. He made Princess Margaret, the younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, develop feelings for him. At that time, Princess Margaret was 29 years old. She had just gone through the pain of having to give up a previous relationship and was feeling very bored with the strict royal protocols. They first met at a private dinner party. The attraction between them happened very quickly. In their secret meetings, Margaret called him by his birth name, Jimmy, and he called her Ma'am according to protocol. But the way they looked at each other clearly showed that they had special feelings. Granger rented a house near Windsor to be close to the princess. For 2 years, they went to the theater together, hosted discreet dinner parties, and spent peaceful weekends in the English countryside. A relationship between a film star and a royal princess may sound beautiful, but in reality, it was filled with difficulties and tragedy ahead. Queen Elizabeth II and the Queen Mother were extremely concerned about this relationship. A male actor who had been divorced twice, 14 years older than the princess, and known for his temper, like Stewart Granger, was completely unacceptable to the royal family. Granger quickly sensed the change from the palace. Invitations to social events became fewer. Old friends also began to keep their distance. His proud nature once again became a barrier. He drank more and often lost his temper when he felt he was being looked down on. By the summer of 1962, the relationship ended in silence, with no official announcement. Princess Margaret returned to her royal duties, while Granger went back to California with deep sadness, the feeling of being rejected by the royal family. Granger's connection with royal titles did not end there. In 1964, he married Caroline Lasserf, a young Belgian actress and model. What was special was that Caroline carried the title of princess from her previous marriage to a prince of the Georgian royal family. The press at the time excitedly reported, "Stewart Granger marries a princess." But in reality, it was a short and turbulent marriage. The lingering impact from his divorce with Gene Simmons and being rejected by the British royal family made Granger's jealousy even stronger. He saw every glance from another man toward his wife as a threat. After only 5 years, this third marriage also ended in 1969, leaving Granger in increasing loneliness. From a major Hollywood star, a man who had once been close to the most powerful figures, Granger began to face a difficult reality. The spotlight faded, major contracts disappeared, and the women he had once loved most were now only distant memories. Even later, when he played Prince Philip in a television film in 1982, it felt like a twist of fate. He was a man who had truly loved a princess, yet in the end, he lived his final years in silence and loneliness. To maintain his life and cover large expenses, Granger had to do something he had never imagined at the height of his career: turn to cattle ranching. He bought vast lands in New Mexico and Arizona. He became one of the first people to introduce the Charolais cattle breed from France into the United States. But the idea of a Hollywood star raising cattle was not easy or romantic, as many people thought. He still had to continue acting just to earn money to maintain the ranch. When leading roles in the United States became fewer, Granger was forced to go to Europe. He moved between Germany, Italy, and Spain to take part in films with much lower budgets. In Germany, he had a short period of relative success when he played the hero Old Surhand in a series of Western films based on the novels of Karl May. But deep inside, he knew he was acting in films that were not of high quality. He once bitterly admitted that he had earned more than $1.5 million in the 1960s, but later lost it all due to bad investments and a luxurious lifestyle he could not abandon. He even had to accept working in television, a major step down for an A-list star at that time. When he joined the series The Men from Shiloh in 1970, he openly said he did it for the money and because it seemed fun, but later felt disappointed because his character lacked depth. Hollywood had turned him from a symbol of power into an ordinary working actor. He had to count every dollar of his salary to pay debts and divorce settlements for his former wives. And there was a truth he revealed. He had never felt proud of any film he had ever made throughout his entire career. In 1981, at the age of 68, in his memoir, Stewart Granger spoke very frankly about his colleagues. He talked about being seduced by Deborah Kerr in a taxi and about his heated arguments with directors because of his arrogant personality. Even when writer Penny Junor wrote a book claiming that Richard Burton had an affair with his former wife Jean Simmons inside their home, Granger filed a lawsuit in a London court in 1987. He won the case and received a large compensation. Although he still maintained his pride, his career at this point had very little left. In 1989, he returned to the Broadway stage in the play The Circle with his old friend, Rex Harrison. He received belated praise, but it was also the last time he stood under the stage lights. In his final years, he always regretted one thing. He should have chosen the path of becoming a doctor, as he had dreamed in his childhood, instead of entering the world of cinema. The final deception of his life did not come from film producers, but from the doctors themselves. In 1980, after smoking up to 60 cigarettes a day for 40 years, when his health declined, doctors diagnosed him with terminal lung cancer and said he had only 3 months to live. In despair, Granger agreed to surgery to remove part of his lung and one rib. But after the operation, the doctors discovered that he did not have cancer, only an old scar from tuberculosis. That useless surgery took away much of his strength and caused his once famous deep voice to become weak and faint. Ironically, after that, real cancer came. Prostate cancer had spread to his bones. In his final years, Stewart Granger was no longer a commanding man. He lived quietly in a small apartment in Santa Monica, California. The sound of the Pacific Ocean waves was the only companion to him each night. He became a lonely man, enduring arthritis and watching close friends, such as Michael Wilding and James Mason, pass away one by one. The phone rang less often. Invitations to parties became fewer and eventually stopped altogether. He often sat watching his own old films at night, looking at the young, strong man on the screen as if he were looking at a stranger. On August 16, 1993, at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, Stewart Granger took his last breath at the age of 80. There was no red carpet, no cameras, and no presence of any princess or major Hollywood star to say farewell. Beside him at that moment were only his 4 children, Jamie, Lindsay, Tracy, and Samantha, the ones he had once admitted he had not fully loved because of his career and his temper. According to his final wish, Stewart Granger's ashes were scattered at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, the place where he had once experienced the happiest and most glorious days of his career. When Stewart Granger took his last breath at Cedars-Sinai Hospital on August 16, 1993, at the age of 80, beside him were only his 4 children. No red carpet, no cameras, and no presence of any princess or major Hollywood star to say farewell. He, the man who once made millions of women around the world hold their breath whenever he appeared, the man who had once loved a real royal princess, left this world in a silence that felt deeply sorrowful. I sit here, thinking a lot about him. Fame is a very strange thing. It can lift a person to the clouds, make the whole world admire them. But when the stage lights go out, it leaves that person standing alone in the dark. Stewart Granger lived a life that many people dream of. Handsome, wealthy, famous, once touching the lives of the most powerful figures. Yet in the end, all that remained was loneliness. The women he loved most had left. Close friends passed away one by one. No matter how bright the spotlight once was, it could not warm the heart of an old man sitting alone in a small apartment in Santa Monica, looking back at his old films as if he were looking at a stranger. The story of Stewart Granger leaves me with many thoughts. He teaches us that even if we are admired by millions, what matters most are the hands that truly hold ours when we grow old and lonely. Fame can bring everything except peace and sincere love. He lost so much to understand that. And today, as we sit here listening to his journey, I hope each of us asks ourselves, what are we chasing? And when all the lights go out, who will truly stay by our side? If Stewart Granger's story makes you reflect, leave a comment to share your thoughts. What regrets have you had in your life? Or what are you pursuing that you truly value? Press like if you feel this story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue listening to real stories about human lives together. Thank you for staying until the very last moment. We will meet again in the next story.